Welcome, everyone. We have Dr. Vincent Teferi on the line, and we have a special edition of our podcast series, Dr. T's podcast series. This is going to be a forum on gut flora / gut health, and Dr. T is going to enlighten and provide knowledge on this rather important yet often undiscussed topic.
So one of the things when we talk about bacteria, people immediately think of something bad. And what they fail to realize is that without bacteria, this planet wouldn't exist. Without bacteria, the world would not function. We wouldn't function. We couldn't live. Because the aspect of proper gut health is a paramount thing in everything that goes on in our body, from the digestion to our food, to the ability to eliminate, to have proper sexual health, to have the ability to have a proper balance of hormones, and even your emotional well-being. So I want to touch on those topics a little bit today and make people realize that, you got to take care of your gut health. And when we talk about the gut, we're talking about the gastrointestinal tract, your food tube, from what goes into your mouth, what comes out the other end. And it's really important. And, the unfortunate thing is there's so many things in today's society that are working against proper gut health. And as a result of it, it's one of the major contributory issues to a lot of the poor health status of people in this country. Let me remind you once again that we live in the most incredible, affluent, technologically advanced medical research, incredible things throughout the world in the United States, and yet we rank 84th in the morbidity and mortality ratio and 37th in comparison to other capitalistic nations with regard to our health of the people that live here. And that is a sad commentary. We consume more drugs than the rest of the world combined. We consume more opiate substances than all of Europe and Asia put together. I mean, it's become a horrific problem in this country. We're dealing with a massive issue associated with opiate addiction in this country because of the overt prescription of pharmaceuticals for the longest period of time. We're dealing with a major problem with gut health just because of the amount of antibiotics that were incredible to help people and save lives back in the day, and it's still very important today. But the very medicines that we have today, because there's been such overprescription of these things, has destroyed much of the natural, healthy gut flora / bacteria that lives in our body. And now many of these bugs, as we'd like to say, are immune to them, and we're having some major challenges, and a lot of problems happen as a result with regard to people's health. So we're going to talk about that forum today. What do you think, Greg?
Massive topics to unpack. First, the domestic pharmaceutical industry. I know from people who are not born in the country who have come here, they were, astounded on how powerful the drugs are here, essentially, for lack of a better term. They're very effective, but also very, very dangerous. I had someone who I grew up with had died from an allergic reaction to medication they were taking for asthma. They literally just passed away. There was no abuse or misuse of the prescription. They just simply passed away. So again, very, very potent stuff, for better or worse. And then the other issue is that, quite frankly, from a consumer point of view, most people go to the doctor and they expect something. Like, in other words, going to the doctor and the doctor saying you have a virus, just go home and sleep it off, does not work with a lot of people. So I think they give out antibiotics. They'll say, oh, well, I see a slight infection here, have some antibiotics just to make the person feel better so they calm down. So that's a huge part of the overprescription and abuse of antibiotics, which is unfortunate, but it really, again, speaks to, I guess, relationship management from the medical professional's point of view.
Well, it's interesting you talk about that, because I have a lot of friends in the medical profession, and many of them are frustrated by the politics that exist and the strong ability to be controlled by the pharmaceutical industry. Many of them obviously understand clearly the pharmaceutical benefits of a lot of different things. But what's happened is that we've forgotten the importance of good food, clean hygiene, proper water, proper air, and all the other different things, especially that's never discussed typically with your medical physician. So over the years, what's happened with a lot of patients, let's say the kid gets sick, right? They got a runny nose and everything else. You go and the patients actually imposed upon the physicians, the pediatricians, that if they didn't get a drug or something, the doctor didn't do anything for them, And a lot of the times these were viruses, and I think once again too, just like back in the 1990s, when the overt prescription of pharmaceuticals were handed out like candy, opiate-based substances, and now the problem that we have is such a huge issue with people who are having drug addictions to narcotics because of the pharmaceuticals that were handed out simply, for a toothache or a back problem or a post-surgical problem, and we, never realizing the propensity of people to have addiction, okay, to the level that they have right now. I think the statistic is like 1 in 8 people take it. And we've known many people, many personal stories of a family member, doctors, lawyers, professional people, blue collar people, kids, all of a sudden they're now becoming an addict because of the fact that they were given a prescription for a toothache and they just had the right combination of, addictive components in their body, and they went down the rabbit hole, and that's a horrible situation. Same thing has happened with antibiotic therapy, that the overt prescription of it for so many different years has created multiple strains of these immunologically resistant organisms to the bacterial antibiotic therapy that's being done. And realistically, once again, it all comes down to that gut microbiome, the combination of things that live in that community of microorganisms, the ecology of your body. Things like bacteria, something called an archaea, which is like a single cell thing that doesn't really have a nucleus, and it gets into all these things like, prokaryotes and eukaryotes. It's not important right now. There's different bugs to do different things, viruses and fungi, things of that. So they make up this microbiome. And what people don't realize, they think, oh my God, I hear a bacteria, I got to have an antibiotic or something like that. Those important bacteria do all the jobs that your body needs to do, from digesting your food and producing vitamins. Without them, it doesn't happen. Enzymes, so on and so forth. The proper pH and flora of the vaginal tract, so a woman doesn't wind up with a fungal infection in the air, or even in a person too. I mean, one of the things a lot of people don't get is that when, and God forbid, they wind up with cancer, okay, if that's what's going to happen to them, that the typical chemotherapeutic effect will eradicate sometimes the cancer cells, but the body becomes so suppressed metabolically and immunologically that it's the perfect time for other organisms to come in and destroy the body. And a lot of times the patients die from things like overwhelming yeast infections, fungal infections, fungicidal issues associated with their lungs, respiratory system, the chemotherapeutic destruction of the cardiovascular system, so on and so forth. So we're constantly striving, and I know that's happening still in medicine, but there's got to be a greater integration of a more holistic approach in dealing with all these horrific diseases. It's very, very challenging, and with with due diligence and time, these things will happen. And one of the most simplistic things too is that, in cancer therapy, and a lot of times it's not brought out typically, that they have to go on a low glycemic diet. They got to get away from the sugars and grains and refined carbohydrates. It's a huge factor because then the body can become overwhelmed by fungus and viruses and things of that nature. But getting back to that gut microbiome, it's such an important thing because, your whole immunological ability to function, okay, has so much to do with your stomach and digestion and detoxification. And, it's just amazing. And and there's a small portion of the GI tract called the cecum, where that's where a lot of the gut biome hangs out. That's where a lot of that healthy bacteria is just waiting there to help the body. And it's pretty incredible. People don't realize that there are 40 trillion microbiome bacterial-based cells in your body. And a lot of them are good guys. They're not bad guys, they're good guys. And there's only about 30 trillion actual cells. So there are more bugs in our body than there are actual human cells. And if we don't help those things to make a better life for themselves within the microbiome, the gut of the body, then we get sick. And it has everything you could possibly think about. There's a correlation, once again, going back to that GI tract and the immune system. You've heard things in pop culture now that your gut is your second brain. Quite frankly, it's actually your first brain. And there's been some amazing information put out there. Mark Hyman became the founder of functional medicine, works out of the Berkshires in Vermont, came up with this incredible protocol talked about with brain health. So yeah, I'm plugging Mark. He did a great job with that. And that's just something for an overall around understanding about the importance of proper immunological balance right within your stomach. And that doesn't mean it's got to be a drug. It's talking about your food. It's talking about what goes into your body and how important it is.
Two major points. You always give so much interesting info that there's so many things I want to discuss that you mentioned just in one breath, really. But two things I would like to address. To your point about cancer, the individual we were talking about before, who will keep anonymous, had access to unlimited funds essentially, but died exactly as you had described. They had taken chemo, body was destroyed, and wound up having fungus on their lungs, and that's how they had passed away. So that being said, traditional medicine essentially failed this individual who had access to it all, basically, and very unfortunate, and was doing very well, seemed to have almost come to a full recovery, and then it came back full board, the fungal infection, and the individual died.
Yeah. And interesting enough, I think we had discussed this, gentleman. They basically said when this all came down, he says, you got 3 weeks to live, and he lived for a year and a half beyond that because he started integrating more of a holistic parameter. But the fact was that he still had, debilitated. He needed some chemotherapeutic things, and then subsequently demise because of this overwhelming infection that was created as part and parcel of the whole disease process. So, yeah, I always say none of us get out alive, but it is a quality of life that goes on and what we need to do and things that we can do that are somewhat more simplistic. And it's just like, it's like Oz. It's like seeing what really goes on behind the curtain. What can you do to give a better quality of life? And we're going to talk about some of those things at the end of this podcast, some simplistic things that people can do to help. But, believe it or not, your gut, well, the lining, this food tube, especially in the GI tract, the small intestines, large intestines, and so on and so forth, is only really one cell thick. And on the other side is your basic immune system. And the body relies so much upon this proper functioning microbiome that if it's not in proper balance, it could lead to things, and people will suffer with allergies and colds and joint pains and body ache and acne and potentially much more serious disorders, as we started to allude to beforehand. So it's a really important factor to get that into balance. I mean, there's something that we'll talk about. The medical term for it is called metabolic endotoxemia. Most of us know it as a slang term called the leaky gut syndrome. And that's when that macrophage, that internal lining of the GI tract becomes so inflamed because the gut flora is so out of balance that it opens up passageways for the stuff that's inside the gut to slip past that one cell barrier layer and go into the body's cavity. And then it's like, there was a movie years ago called Fantastic Voyage, built back, I think it was back in the 60s with Raquel Welch. And it was a great kind of campy type of movie, but that's really kind of explains how the body goes, the white blood cells are attacking this little organism. It happens to be a little, group of people that were put in, scientists, to go into the body to fix somebody who's in a very unhealthy state. So leaky gut leads to a myriad of different issues. And once again, the real correction of it is not a drug. It's not a medication. It's not a shot. It's really getting the gut flora back into balance. In fact, believe it or not, some of the research that's being done right now at some of the major universities in this country, they will do a floral biopsy transplant. They will take the healthy gastrointestinal flora microbiome out of somebody's colon and then transfer it into that really sick person to kind of stimulate, it's like to precipitate and create a catalyzed reaction of better health and more proper bacteria in their body. Is that crazy or what? But isn't it amazing? It basically comes down to taking a poop from one person and putting it in somebody else. You got good poop, this got bad poop. Your poop is healthy, this poop is unhealthy. It's crazy. But
absolutely.
It works.
Absolutely. And finally, the topics being given the researching and credibility it deserves. My sister's eldest daughter appeared to have signs of autism at a young age. So my sister, who has a background in chemistry and biology, wound up doing a ton of research, and her research led her to leaky gut syndrome, which I just mentioned as being one of the factors that could potentially lead someone to have symptoms similar to autism, leading her down this path of researching how to fix it. And it turned out, incidentally, that was not the case. It was another disorder is what her daughter's problem was. But nonetheless, though, she found that there was actually a lot of medicine in the East, in the former Soviet Union, that addressed this specifically, and that various probiotics through natural means, such as bone broth soup, were used to build up the bacteria in your gut after being devastated by taking rounds of antibiotics.
Hmm. Amazing, right?
Hmm.
I mean, here's another thing too. Here's something people probably don't know. We all know about the substance called serotonin. It makes us feel good. And when people don't have enough of it and they don't produce enough, the drug that they take is a serotonin uptake inhibitor. But so Prozac, Zoloft, all these different things that are out there are designed to do that, and that's become a huge, key point of the pharmaceutical industry now because people are so stressed out, and have a lot of different issues. But the reality is, once again, that 70% of the serotonin, your feel-good chemical that it promotes emotional well-being, self-confidence, and good sleep, is made in your gut. So if your gut chemicals, your gut flora is not appropriate, when that microbiome is in good shape, chances are your gut is too. And your serotonin and other neurochemical levels are more likely to be optimal. And as a result, you feel calm, balanced, optimistic, confident, and you sleep well. It's like, oh my God, imagine that. That's that magic pill potion lotion, but it comes down to getting a healthy, biological based ecosystem in your body. And that's what we need to do. That's
Well,
such a good factor. So
back.
I'm going to make some recommendations for people to do because we just want to help people get a basic understanding, and just get it out there.
Well, let's step back for a moment. So, like you were talking about the serotonin and the inhibitors, and just for people's for clarification, most recreational drugs and most so-called mental health drugs, like the doctor said, Prozac and whatnot, regulate this chemical in your brain. It's as simple as that. More of the chemical makes you happier, less makes you feel anxiety, sadness, and both recreational drugs and Prozac and other similar drugs manipulate that very function. However, like the doctor was saying, is that this function can likewise be affected by your gut health. That's really the point.
That's a huge factor. In fact, there have been enough studies right now to show that when the proper gastrointestinal balance starts occurring, miraculously, people start to function and feel better. Look, before these wonder drugs, let's talk about it. In a lot of the institutions where people were committed because of supposedly insanity or nervous breakdowns and things of that nature, what did they do a lot of the times? Now, we're not talking about one flew over the cuckoo's nest. We're talking about the places that actually really work that kind of help people. Instead of just loading them out and drugging them out of their gourd, they put them in a cleaner environment. They took them out of the cities and they put them into fresh air, just like the people that had tuberculosis and things of that nature. They breathed some clean air, in upstate New York and out in the mountains and near the ocean and things of that nature. They gave them better food, things that weren't adulterated with, high fructose corn syrup and genetically modified foods and all the different adulterants and preservatives and things of that nature that are in our food today. And that's what's killing our gut. Okay. That's one of the key factors right now to try and change, all the gluten and stuff like that. We got to take some responsibility right now to make ourselves healthier. And it doesn't make a difference what the disease or diagnosis is, that all the things that we're talking about will only help people. There are no contraindications for any of this stuff. You know what I'm saying? It's just
Absolutely.
being healthy and eating better.
Eating fermented cabbage and drinking bone broth is not going to kill anyone, is the point.
That's right.
And,
definitely.
And I would say this too, off topic, on topic. I saw a documentary, a study where they fed rats a diet similar to what you would get from eating, high processed, fast foods. In other words, high fat, high sugar, high salt. And they found it led to violence and insanity amongst the rats, attacking each other, a huge aggression. So think about this again.
Society, right?
That's what I was going to say. Look, in the poor areas of the country, they have, like I said, you're going to a bad area when you start seeing various generic fried food places.
Oh my God,
as well
that's all there is.
And
I mean, it's so sad. I mean, I watched something that they had on HBO a year ago or 2 years ago. They were talking about the health of America, the obesity crisis. And there was one commentary that talked about the inner city bodega, for example, and how little kids actually were interacting with some people. And I'm sure like not every place is like that, but in a lot of these places, all they are going to be selling, our fast foods and high fructose corn syrup and all the garbage that's in our foods and everything else. And there were no fruits, no vegetables. And these little boys were sitting there and they said they saw this guy who was working there. And he said, "Mister, what are you eating?" And he basically said, "Well, it's a carrot or celery or something." They saw this green thing hanging off it. They never got exposed to that before. So, I mean, look, we really, I said, this is not anything to do. I said bodega, but about the Hispanic community. It's everywhere in every city, regardless of ethnicity or background. It's just coming back to getting good, healthy foods. And then once again, too, that farm to table mentality, but going to a farmer's market, the organic based stuff, so on and so forth, makes a big difference. And it's harder to get some of that sometimes in the inner cities, not necessarily in the more affluent areas. They can get a bunch of it, but in the areas where people don't have as much money and as much expendable income, and sometimes because of associated issues like with high crime rate, what have you, you don't have the big shopping centers coming in and selling foods in the community, what have you. So there's a challenge onto itself, but it's like, here's the amazing thing. What gets in the way of our microbiome, this internal complex of ecology that goes on in our body, has to do with this community of microbiomes. And it's comprised of, like, as I said, bacteria and archaea and, viruses and fungi and all this other stuff. And then just based upon that whole individual microbiome, it's sometimes called our genetic footprint. Whoa, this is big stuff. It will determine the uniqueness of our own DNA, hereditary factors, predisposition disease, body type, body set point weight. Look, we have a big problem with obesity in this country. 84% of the population are overweight. It's a big issue. And 40% plus, you want to be honest, I think it's even higher than that, are obese. And there's 16 forms of cancer linked to obesity. There's issues of heart disease and diabetes and just a multitude of different problems with greater propensity the more we are obese. And so that's one of the things that we really focus on in our clinic, not so much from the aesthetic value of losing weight, but about getting their bodies into a better state of health and function, correcting their dietary intake, and helping them adapt to a better lifestyle. And the weight comes off as a side effect. So that's a big clinical factor. But here's the bigger picture. Imagine changing the predestined determination, like my mother had heart disease, my father was a diabetic, da. But why is it that you could change your life and actually change your genetic profile, not only for you, but then for the future generations? That's amazing. That really deals with the gut. That's the issue of the epigenetics. That there's a whole different topic onto itself.
Just to backtrack for a moment. So interesting enough, my observation, so I lived close to Harlem for some time, and they had numerous bodegas, as you described. But ironically, they also had a fresh food market, like right there. And, but still, most people in general went to the bodegas and fast food places. And I think it's two reasons.
Cheaper.
Exactly, cheaper, just simply cheaper, and also lack of knowledge of how poisonous this stuff is. Like, who goes into a shop and thinks, oh, no kidding, you're selling me cancer, poison, and death for $1.59,
And the amazing thing is, if we just talk about home, for example, you think about, a high population of African American and Hispanic people. There's some amazingly incredible dishes. You talk about soul food, collard greens, and all the different things that you can eat, and then the Hispanic foods. You talk about the fish and the pot and the chicken, and all the different things that come together. Good, healthy stuff, but yet people aren't getting it. Why is that happening? Because they can go and buy a liter of Pepsi, for 99 cents, but they can't even buy a gallon of water, for less than $5. What the heck is that all about? They can buy cookies and chips and stuff like that for a couple of, for less than $1. But then if they want an apple or something healthy, just like in that market, it costs them a lot more. And if they label it organic, then they jack up the price even more so. So look, like, you can understand why people go down this rabbit hole and then they get sick. And it's like, why in God's name is this person so ill? Because what they were putting into their body for so many years is just so bad. And that's expanded way beyond the urban areas. It's happening all over. And the media has done a great job with marketing and pushing all this stuff that we see pushed into our face, fast food on a nightly basis, where you sit down after you've worked all day, you just want to watch the boob tube a little bit, chill out, and you get bombarded with all pizzas and fried foods and this thing and that thing and this drug and that drug, and a little lizard walking around selling you insurance. And I don't know. It's just amazing. For time constraints, I think we should probably get into some of the things that people can start doing to help themselves right now. What do you think?
Absolutely. Let's give them some pointers.
Okay. So let's get into that aspect of what can you do to help that gut microbiome. Well, the first thing, believe it or not, you've probably heard of this before, go gluten-free. There's a disease called celiac disease, which is less than 1% of the population. But then there's something called non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which is guesstimated at 70%. Those figures are way off base. The numbers are much larger. And people have a high degree of sensitivity. And a lot of it, once again, has to do, with how the body's in things like wheat and oats and kale and all these other different grains affect our body's ability to process them and digest them. And once again, it has a lot to do now with all the genetically modified stuff. And, God forbid you talk about that too much, you're going to have the GMO squad coming after you. That's what's happened to so many different companies. I mean, what was it, Chipotle Grill? Once they said that, that was the end of their story, how sad that was. But, don't want to get into politics right now. But for personal use and personal understanding, if people can get into a better way of eating to eliminate most of these things, okay, you're going to feel better and be healthier. And you'll find that when you start to do it, so going gluten-free, you'll start to see changes in the way you feel, your digestion, the amount of gas that you have, and just the way your whole issue that we talked about in proper gut health. So you feel less inflammation and so on and so forth. Okay, so here's a big controversial thing right now. Avoid antibiotics. Well, look, antibiotics have done some amazing things to eradicate some harmful bacteria, especially when infections become overwhelming to the body. So they're going to be needed to some degree. But, once again, if there's a fly, you don't go after it with a cannon, you use a fly swatter. Try and take a more simplistic approach to dealing with the body's immune system. Health is from the inside out, not from the outside in. What you put into it, okay, makes a big difference. But the fact of the matter is that the healthier we are from the inside out, the better our immunological system. And that's what we're talking about with gut health today. So, once again, think about the aspect of only using antibiotics. And a lot of, I have to say this, that most of my friends who are physicians now of medicine have become much more conservative of handing this stuff out. And, because a lot of times somebody goes for bronchitis, they give them an antibiotic. And it's kind of weird, but sometimes they start to actually feel better, and it's a virus. So there are pathways of healing that go in the body, okay, that still succumb to certain things, even with other primary infections. And then a lot of times, the expectation of the patient to get a drug because that's what they paid for to go there to feel better. Once again, heal from the inside out. Viruses are not going to be knocked out by an antibiotic. They're for antibacterial substances. So don't overtly consume antibiotics. Try to avoid them as much as you can, because once you do that, you got to rebalance your gut flora, and you got to start taking all those different things and eating properly, much more so than you did even prior to that time. And as I said, most people don't have good gut health to begin with. Go organic. Why? Because conventionally farmed meat, poultry, dairy products all contain added antibiotics and hormones. The animals, 90% of all the antibiotics that are produced in the world go into animals because they live in such squalid pens that they always contain and contract infection. So if they give the antibiotics to the animals, guess what? You're eating it too, people. It's going into your food. So try and avoid that. Grass-fed, grass-finished. What does that mean? It means that the cow went outside, start eating some food, and then they didn't go back inside and eat a bunch of grain with a bunch of, GMO, blah, blah, blah stuff into it. They stayed outside and they finished up their meal on all those healthy herbs and grasses that are out there, free of pesticides, herbicides, and synthetic fertilizers. Okay, so real important factor. Okay, eat fermented foods. What's a fermented food? Well, you're going to be very happy to hear that some of the old things that our grandparents and parents did that kept them healthy for years and made them live way into their 90s was as simplistic as certain things like eating pickles and sauerkraut and other fermented vegetables. I mean, the Korean culture has embraced the pickled fermented cabbage, kimchi. Stuff stinks, but it tastes amazing, and it's so healthy for you, okay? The other things like blueberries and apple cider vinegar and kefir, which is a type of yogurt, okay, that has a low sugar content and a lot of those cultural bacteria that are really good for you. And the apple cider vinegar, I mean, Google it. There's a multitude of use of it for it, consuming it on a daily basis. So get those prebiotic substances to feed the probiotics. And, the probiotics are those healthy bacteria in the gut. So, taking supplementation in this day and age with a healthy group of bacteria is really important. And you know that you've heard about Bifidobacillus and Acidophilus and all these different things. There are like 2,000 types of really healthy bacteria. Most of these capsules that you're going to get, and they're not inexpensive, but here's what I can tell you right now. Unfortunately, the price point on a good probiotic is more expensive than the stuff that you may be getting at a lot cheaper in greater quantity from some of these big stores. And that's the reason why you need a trained practitioner of the healing arts to guide you in the right direction and tell you the right things to get. And possibly they'll even dispense it to you, or you'll be able to pick it up through their recommendation.
So that said, how can people reach out to you for this kind of coaching and guidance then?
Well, look, our practice is in Fair Lawn, New Jersey, but you could reach us on a national basis by, contacting our office at 201-773-0909. You could also reach out to me through our website, email admin@tafuriwellness.com. You could pick, there's a multitude of ways to get in touch with us, but check out our website, tafuriwellness.com, and you'll see what we're all about and why it's so important to focus on these things. The things that we talk about in our practice, that every patient that comes through that door, okay, is treated with the basic formula of correcting the structural issues in their body to improve the functionality, looking at their biochemistry, what's going on from the inside out, and the foods and water and everything that they're ingesting, and the toxicity as a result of that, and then the aspect of their emotional well-being. And we help a multitude of patients on a non-surgical, non-pharmaceutical basis achieve that. And when we do need that, we have our affiliate ambassadors, the doctors of medicine that I've worked with and I trust with, holistic neurologists, orthopedic surgeons, GI practitioners, allergists, so on and so forth. When those people are so debilitated that they need a little bit more medical intervention, we bring them in. We're not anti-medicine. We just want people to get a better quality of life. And, the doctors that I work with have this understanding, and they work with me because of my expertise in my area, once again, too, not everybody knows everything. I certainly don't. And, a lot of my friends that are in medicine, they're just as humble as I am and saying, look, you know what, I can do this, I can't do that. Let me refer it to the appropriate person. So I just want to finish up this thing once again, too. So avoid processed foods. That's incredible. The junk foods are altered and modified so much that they mess up the digestive bacteria, and you wind up, not breaking down your food and assimilating properly. So it becomes garbage in. But on top of that, you want to get sick from. You want to be having GI upset. You have reflux. You have all these different things that are going on, and it's just bad. So, avoid trans fats and preservatives and artificial ingredients and sweeteners. Eliminate those refined carbohydrates, the sweet, starchy foods. That's an important factor where they will just feed the unhealthy bacteria. Once again, the good guts bacteria live off those prebiotics that we talked about before, and there are more of them too. But the bad bacteria lives off of all those sugars and starches and stuff like that. So it's really bad. So, this upset to the balance and diversity of the microbiome leads to a lot of negative effects on the core function of your body. So we talked about antibiotic therapy, and last but not least, okay, an important factor that they can integrate into that is even lower the stress and the exercise more about doing things to kind of boost the immune system. Stress hinders immune function because the body diverts its energy away from fighting off infections and placing it primarily on the concerns about keeping you alive, which is one of the reasons why chronic stress can kill you, and that, regarding the quality of your life. So stress causes a suppression of your immune response. It bops this level, something called cytokines, and that contribute to this entire inflammatory process and damage cells. And let's face it, most of the medicines that we're taking is for pain, inflammation, so on and so forth. So if you get your gut health under control, a lot of these things are going to improve. And you know what? It doesn't take a lot. You have to become an educated consumer. And we can help you with that. And then, believe me, there are a lot of other books and information out there. This was designed to help you understand about what you need to do about getting your gut into a healthier place. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Dr. T. And I think just to recap, essentially avoid antibiotics unless, fully recommended.
Necessary. And you may need a physician, to guide you down that direction or not. And hopefully, they're going to be honest with you when they knew. But, the things have changed. The politics of medicine have gotten better. They understand the benefits, I believe, of certain pharmaceutical intervention, and then some of the negative stuff too. But, if that's not being said and you're still not getting the answers you want, you need to look at more holistic practitioners like myself and many others that are out there.
Sounds good. Sounds very, very good. So, thank you, Dr. T, for these words of wisdom. And again, everyone can reach Dr. T at tafuriwellness.com. We'll links in the description. And that thank you again. And let's
All
wrap
right.
it
Well,
up.
thank you for giving me the opportunity to share. I love to do this, as you can hear. I'm passionate about what I do. I've been doing it for 40 years, and I don't really see it changing anytime soon, because the mission is to help people, because there are a lot of sick people in this country, and they definitely need some help.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and like. Thank you.